Hello and welcome to This Week at the Movies. I'm Matt.
And I'm Eric.
And even though it is 2025, we are still living in 2024. For the purposes of this show, we are going to do our best and worst of the year, our 10 best, the five movies that were the least best for us in the last year. So looking forward to going on this journey. I feel like I saw a million movies, and that's not
Yeah.
that far off, especially in December.
There was a surprising amount of movies that I was looking back this year and I was like, oh my gosh, I really enjoyed a lot of things. Like movies I hadn't thought about like all year, like The Fall Guy and Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes and stuff like that. Like, I don't know. There was a lot. Furiosa was this year. That felt like a lifetime ago.
Night
Yeah.
Swim was this year, which I'll be covering in
Yeah.
one of these lists. I'll let you guess which one.
Never forget
Never-
Night Swim.
Yeah, the best sick weekend you ever had.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to kick off. We're going to do our top 10 first. We're going to go in ascending order, 10 to 1, and then we will end with some of the laughably bad films of the year. I will kick off. My number 10 it was a great year to me for horror films. There are a couple of them on my top 10 list. The first of those is Longlegs, which is still my number 10. Starred Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage. Came out in July from Osgood Perkins. I am a huge Silence of the Lambs fan. And this movie, not only in its early 90s setting, but in its tone, in the way the story is conveyed, gave me a lot of Silence of the Lambs vibes. Does something different, a little more supernatural as we go toward the end, but I like the performances. It was a movie that creeped me out, stuck with me throughout most of the summer. It was up in my top 5. We've seen a lot of bigger movies come this fall, so it slid down a little bit, but remained in my top 10. And Eric, it seemed like your number 10 was also from the world of horror.
Mm-hmm. My number 10 is It's What's Inside. And again, it's a movie I think people should know as little about going into as possible, but I will crack a little bit of a spoiler here and just say that every actor that you see basically had to be I don't know what their casting system must have been like or what their character creation system must have been like, but the performers have to be able to play each other as if they're embodying themselves. And so every character has to be able to play almost every other character. And it is shocking how great of a job everyone does given that concept. It was a huge surprise. It was twists and turns. It was, I don't know, just like an enjoyable sort of not who done it, but guess what's gonna happen kind of thriller. And I just it just stuck around in my mind, and it's just so impressive what they pulled off.
And that one is on Netflix if you're hoping
Mhm.
to check it out. That was an original streamer. I think it dropped during the first part of the spooky season.
Yeah.
What is your number 9?
Spooky season's king, Nosferatu. um this is lower on my list than I thought it was gonna be, but I think the performances all around are excellent. I think this is one of the most gorgeous movies that was made, and again, I could like live in the vibe of some of the like the desolate castles and the like the snow mountains and like the Transylvanian villagers and I this is for sure. I'm really excited to hear that the Blu-ray or the 4K is getting an extended cut, and I'll be so curious to check that out. Um, yeah, like it just one of the best horror movies of the year, and even over I can get over the mustache. That's good.
Well, they had to do something a little bit different. My number 9 is the Olympic film September 5th. It got a limited release at the end of December. You will have more of a chance to see it when it expands nationwide on January 17th. It is set behind the scenes of the 1972 Munich Olympics, which was the first Olympics where they could do this kind of live broadcast technology, and ABC was pioneering that. You had Jim McKay, the Wide World of Sports guy, kind of leading the way. And then all of a sudden, something happened in the Olympic Village. The Israeli delegation was kidnapped and held hostage, and it suddenly became something completely different. So you're kind of in the control booth. You're out on the field. They use stock footage of Jim McKay hosting during that day, but you're following producers like Rune Arledge, it's played by Peter Sarsgaard, and then John Madero is kind of the on the scenes leading the coverage back there. They had Benjamin Walker playing a young Peter Jennings, who was at that time not a huge high profile reporter who had just been dumped to ABC Sports to do human interest pieces at the Olympic, who ends up being kind of on the forefront out at the Olympic Village during this. It was a very tense film. It's only about an hour and a half. It builds a lot of tension. I thought it was very fascinating. If you're a fan of journalism, sports, historical biopics, I thought this was a really captivating film. My number 8, another one that's a little bit journalist focused, and that is the film Civil War. We saw this one come all the way back in April. It stuck with me. I loved Kirsten Dunst and Kelly Spaney as these photographers on the front of a ideological conflict in the United States. Some people didn't like it. We talked about it at the time because it doesn't clearly define its political positions,
Right.
but that wasn't really the point of it for me. So it was definitely one that stuck with me. I've seen a couple of times this year, and enjoyed seems weird when you're talking about something kind of as dour as Civil War, but one that really impressed me. So what is your number 8?
My number 8 is one that I watched like really late. I watched it just I have to be a few days ago. Is Juror number 2. Nicholas Hoult is phenomenal. There are an amazing like cast of familiar like character actors, and this is another one that like I won't say too much about the premise of the movie, but the absolute weight of the decisions that Nicholas Hoult has to make, the consequences of it, the climax of the movie, the ending, the way that things play out, it's like heart racing. It's I something about courtroom dramas. One of my favorite movies ever is The Judge, and another one is 12 Angry Men. And I think there are some definite nods to 12 Angry Men in this. And there's I cannot imagine having to be in this position. And it's so interesting to explore something like that. Like, I honestly think that this should be used as a test for how people define justice, and people should have to watch the movie and have to like stop before the end of the movie and say, what do you think should happen? I think it's great.
And it's hard to believe a Clint Eastwood directed film got kind of unceremoniously dumped. It was in some theaters, I guess, for a week, but never really got much of a run. Now you can catch this one. It is streaming on Max.
Yeah.
What is your number 7?
It's Saturday night. It is like everything from the time period setting to the pacing of the movie running like a clock, which is just sitting there right there in his hand in this poster that we have, and like the individual characters, like the on point recreation of these people and who they are, what they look like, what their mannerisms are, and everything. Lorne Michaels running the first episode of Saturday Night Live. it was so exciting. It was one of the most riveting, like heart pumping movies of the year, and I feel like I don't know. It was just fantastic.
Yeah, that was a good one. My number seven, another of our summer films, the lone MCU movie this year, and that is Deadpool and Wolverine. I had a really good time watching this. Um, it was up pretty high on my list for a while. I have reshuffled some things, and it settles here at seven. But I loved this movie. I love the back and forth with Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman. I love the way that they retconned a lot of the Fox Marvel things in there and did kind of a celebration of Fox Marvel things. The cameos worked for me. I thought it was a lot of fun. And my number six is also a comedy, and it's the same one that you had up there. We're not that far apart, and that is Saturday Night. I am a huge Jason Reitman fan. Those of you that follow me know that one of his films, Up in the Air, is actually in my top 10 of all time. This is one of my favorites from him. I thought he does a great job putting this together. I will probably never look at J.K. Simmons the same way. Not in a bad way, but that was like an all-time banger. I love the way, you're talking about a lot of actors having to impersonate some very well-known and popular performers in our culture, and I thought they did that really well. I was very taken with Corey Michael Smith and what he does as Chevy Chase, and I liked Gabriel LaBelle as a young Lorne Michaels, and the tension, the real-time feel, the pressure. This kind of prompted me to go and watch that first episode of Saturday Night Live in the aftermath. So it was a lot of fun. What is your number six?
My number six is Cuckoo, one that I doubt is going to be anywhere near your top 10 list of the year, but it has stuck with me. The giallo influences, the mystery of the whole thing, the creativity of the creature, Dan Stevens doing his thing. I do not remember of the name of the actress.
Hunter Schafer.
Hunter Schafer. It's just spectacular. It's a movie that I should be alienating because there are characters who make decisions about how to treat other humans that are just bizarre, and yet it's just like one of the most tense, cool, like threatening mysteries, and it just really stuck with me.
Yeah, it was definitely a different and a weird film for sure. Another Neon release, Longlegs, was also a Neon release. They had some interesting. This was another one that dropped kind of in the middle of summer. What was your number five?
My number five was Monkey Man. Dev Patel is phenomenal. Like directing, starring, it was an absolute blast getting to see him do this, and it was interesting getting a perspective of things that are happening culturally outside of the US. And I just it's interesting to take this like gritty sort of pulpy take on the superhero kind of narrative, and knowing that he's not really a superhero. This is more of like your action star John Wick kind of thing, but there's just a little more weight and grit to it because there are some very real issues that it's dealing with. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, he did a really good job. A lot of great action sequences in that one. A lot of great stunt work as well. My number five, kind of a hidden gem that I saw as a Cinemark secret screening, is the movie Sing Sing. Another one did not get a great release and rollout campaign. Kind of came out in the middle of summer, not a time period you would expect. This is a film that's based on a real program at the prison where at Sing Sing Correctional Facility, where prisoners are given a chance to rehab and to build new lives through a drama program. some of those prisoners who actually have been through that program appear in this film as versions of themselves, and that includes Clarence Macklin, who was pictured there alongside Coleman Domingo. But Coleman Domingo, the star here, gives a beautiful performance. This is probably the most emotional and engaging prison film I've seen since Shawshank Redemption. And interesting to see that coming, on the 30th anniversary of Shawshank. I think you get a lot of those vibes there of this friendship and trying to find hope in a sometimes hopeless place. Just beautifully constructed. It is going to get a re-release on January 17th. So if you never got a chance to see it, that'll be a great chance to hopefully get a chance to take a look at that when it pops up in theaters as part of an Oscar run. I'm hoping Coleman will get a nomination. I thought he was fantastic there.
Cool.
My number 4 was actually one that you had a little lower on your list, and that is Nosferatu. One of the most visually stunning films of the year for me, honestly. Just some of the shots, the cinematography, the craft here is great. Really appreciated Lily Rose Depp in the lead role, and what Bill Skarsgård does, creating just another terrifying monster of a completely different sort than we've seen him do before. And I talked about this movie last week and how much we enjoyed it, but definitely one that stuck with me. It's been a huge box office hit since coming out, so I'm be curious to see how it does with awards. It wasn't a big player for Golden Globes, but that might be because they come out a little bit earlier. We still have about a couple of more weeks before the Oscar nominations come out, so I'll be curious to see how much momentum it pulls. Getting kind of excited for that one. But what was your number 4?
My number 4 was actually Inside Out 2, because it was the most emotional, gut-wrenching experience that I had watching a movie this year. And I was trying to question that in my head. I was like, was it really? Because there are a lot of different, like, emotionally heavy, like, movies that I saw for a lot of different reasons. But no, I saw this movie twice this year, and I can officially say this was the most viscerally affecting movie, just from its depiction of anxiety and the idea of how we build who we are based off our experiences and what we choose to remember and what we choose to forget, and like just the idea of building an identity and trying to build that around not being good enough, and then trying to be a self-acceptance and just being accepted for who you are, and just like, so it's so ambitious in the things that it tries to talk about, and I think it is so successful. It's
still my favorite animated film of the year as well. What was your number 3?
One from your list, just much higher, Civil War. I love what this movie actually ended up being. A road movie that explores the, in my opinion, more truthful nature of what it would be like in the middle of a civil war in America, and how chaotic and how unstable and how unclear the lines would be. Like, I adore it. Like, even the climax of the movie, it doesn't feel like it feels like the climax of a war, but it doesn't feel like the end of anything. It's like the beginning of now what. Everything about this movie has to say, like, what actually, you out there who is for some reason thinking that you are going to engage in some sort of fight and, like, win something against your neighbor, what actually do you think you win? Like, what mound of dirt are you going to be the king of? Like, it's extremely powerful, I think. And I really think that it's going to be interesting to see how people react to this movie over time.
Yeah, I think it's been a little forgotten and a little underrated. After coming out in April, we've seen a few of these March, April films. You and I are remembering some of them on this list, but I don't hear enough people, I think, still talking about them. My number 3, a little bit different, is Wicked. The first half of this musical tale, really enjoyed Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande here. The music, the scope, the production design really pulled me in. I actually saw this one twice in theaters within a week. I've gotten the soundtrack, the book. Today, my wife and I are watching The Wizard of Oz. So it's just one that I've really enjoyed. It actually dropped on December 31st on VOD. So if you didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, you can actually pull it that way. And it comes with a sing-along version, which I know matters to a lot of people.
Wow.
And there's actually a sing-along version in theaters now, too. I don't know if I want to go sing with a group of people, but, sometimes it's fun. I just really was blown away by the craft and the film there. We're getting down to our final 2. Eric and I have a different number 2. We have the same number 1. So I'll give my number 2 first, which is the movie Conclave. Comes from director Edward Berger. It is available now to stream on Peacock. He did All Quiet on the Western Front for Netflix a couple of years ago. I thought that movie was beautifully crafted. It didn't totally resonate with me. Conclave could not have resonated with me more. I actually considered for a while whether I was going to flip it to 1. I would consider it really my 1B, almost like last year. Choosing between Barbie and Oppenheimer was kind of difficult. Choosing between Conclave and what I'll have, what Eric and I have at 1, was very difficult. For me, all-time favorite films are things that I love the craft and the story, but also ask larger worldview questions. And Conclave certainly does that. Ray Fiennes is incredible in the lead role. For a movie that's mostly men talking in rooms, they make this very tense at times. The use of score, the way they build the tension through this process, and I thought it was beautifully crafted. The look and the feel is incredible, but it's the ideas and some of the emotional resonance of some of the sequences that really just stuck with me. I was blown away when I saw it in theaters, and it has stayed with me ever since. Came out in October, but as I mentioned, now streaming on Peacock. Well, go ahead.
Conclave was spectacular. I think the only reason that it didn't end up cracking my top 10 is just because of the sheer inventiveness or the visual flair of like so many other movies as like crafted movies. But it's so exciting and investing, like where that movie goes and what kind of questions it raises. But yeah.
So what is your number 2?
My number 2 is also one that I strongly debated with switching with my number 1. It's Challengers. The absolute most intense movie that I've seen this year. I've seen it twice now. Like the 2 leads are spectacular. Zendaya is spectacular. Again, this is a movie that is made about people that I would not want to read about. I wouldn't want to know what their story is, but because of the way their story is told, because of the way this movie is laid out, it is one of the best movies that I've seen in the year. And I will never get over. I don't think there's been a more tense ending, like climax, than the final bout of tennis where the camera is locked onto the tennis ball and is being flung across the court and you're following in its POV. And it just, the movie ends almost perfectly. I have like a little bit of questions about things with Zendaya's character and things like that, but it's a story about love, and it's a story about like twisted nature of different kinds of conditional love, and it is successful on, I think, almost every level.
Yeah, this is another one that came out in April earlier in the year. It is streaming now on Prime Video, so you can check that out. I like this one a lot. It actually ended up as number 12 for me on the year. So, um, very, very well done story. But we have arrived at number one. We both ended up the same place, a movie that was released on March 1st. It is hard to believe it has been so long, and that is Denis Villeneuve's Dune Part 2. This one's streaming on both Max and Netflix, so you can check it out. I thought at the time that it was for sure going to be one of the favorites for Best Picture. It seems like it is. I don't know if it's when it got released, but people have forgotten how much we liked it and how great it was. I do wonder if they would have been better releasing it later in the year. But I just rewatched it again on New Year's Eve, and still holds up for me.
Mm. What's funny is the movie didn't actually quite hold up the same way that it hit for me with the first one, the first time I watched it. And I think the difference is that the first time I watched it, I watched part one very close with it.
Yeah.
And I feel the weight of the fall of House Atreides and everything kind of carried in and whatnot. This is a movie that things that happen in it, it is a great story told very passively. Things are happening sometimes off screen, like Fade Routha's conquest of things. Like, the things are very quiet and yet still packed with like scenes of action and things like that are happening. But I think the core cast of Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Rebecca Ferguson, Josh Brolin, Florence Pugh, who I wish we could have seen more of, even the cameo from Anya Taylor-Joy, like Dave Bautista, like the Skarsgård, Austin Butler, everyone is worth standing out, and I would watch a movie following just their character. And the interplay and the epic scope of things, and again, I think it's a visual feast. I don't think there's a movie with better visuals that came out this year. So, yep.
Yeah, and for me, that's a little bit of the difference between 1 and 2. I thought 1 was visually stunning too, but I did not really buy into any of the characters except for oddly Jason Momoa's character.
Yeah.
That's the only one I cared about. But I thought they did such a beautiful job of building this one, the relationship between Paul and Johnny. Timothy Chalamet and Zendaya are great here. As you mentioned, Rebecca Ferguson, still probably my favorite supporting actress performance of the year. Just some great scenes. Austin Butler, Leah Seydoux, who appears in
Right.
one sequence but is very captivating. I think Florence Pugh and Anya Taylor-Joy's characters are going to be built out more for number 3, which is coming sometime in the next 2 or 3 years. Always the wait. Well, those were the movies that we loved. There are also movies that stuck with us for wholly different reasons. And I mentioned I thought this was a fantastic year for horror movies, but it was the highest of highs. And as you will see in this next selection, some of the lowest of lows. We are going to go 5-1 of our worst films of the year it should be ascending, but we're going to call it descending order, really. So what is your 5th?
So some of my picks are going to be unfair. I'm just going to say, like to me, a bad movie, it is worse to be a movie that has potential and squanders it than a movie that is just flat bad. And I have some just flat bad movies on this list. Well, my number 5, like going from not the worst to the worst, is Joker Foi le Deux. This movie was such a squandered waste of an excellent idea to follow up the movie Joker. You have Lady Gaga in the movie for almost no reason, even though there is a very well articulated reason that she could have been in the movie. They did. and then they decided to not fully 100% commit to the musical aspect of the movie, considering the runtime versus the frequency of songs. It just, this core idea that Arthur Fleck would be caught up in the legacy of the Joker and whether or not he would be able to survive that is such a good idea to just meddle with and squander and make you sit through all this other tangential stuff. It just, this movie could have almost been a short film epilogue to Joker, and it would have been fascinating, but it just wasted like an excellent idea.
My number 5, the first theatrical movie I saw in 2024, definitely stuck with me. Night Swim. It's a horrible waste of talent. It's not a bad idea, although the terror of a backyard swimming pool still was not made clear to me. They have some decent actors in here. Carrie Condon, who was coming off like a Best Supporting Actress nomination for the Oscars, is in here for no apparent reason. Wyatt Russell, there were some decent actors in this. It's just bad. My number 4 is similar. Sometimes horror movies miss. Catherine Waterston, John Cho, they are good. Afraid is not good. I don't think anyone is as terrified of AI and its influence on the world as Hollywood screenwriters who have now tried to write AI themes in here. You'll probably recognize the daughter there. Their daughter is the daughter from Shrinking, who, that's my favorite show of the year. She's incredible in that. All of these people can act. None of them were given anything worth their time here. It's a flaccid waste, and that's how I would probably describe both of those first two. When we get further down, it's more the train wreck area. But what is number 4 for you?
Number 4 for me is, I barely want to talk about it, which is fitting for the name, Speak No Evil. I just abhor the fact that they've made 2 different versions of this movie where they have this excellent idea for a thriller. Both versions of them have one scene that really well encapsulates what the movie could have been. This one being this extremely tense sequence where characters all seem to know what's going on and you don't know whether or not they're going to get away. And it just, it stands as such a joke to me still that in this version of the movie, you have the characters fight and wrestle over a gun, and one of them almost kill the bad guys of the movie, only for the bad guys to talk to them, and they go like, "Hey, why are you doing this to us?" And they say, "Because you let us." They didn't let you do anything in this version of the movie. They have fought and pushed away the entire movie. No, there's nothing left of the idea of politeness being the downfall of somebody. It just absolutely is not what it claims to be. And it just came across as like hokey, and it's some of the stuff that happens, still characters doing really dumb things. I couldn't do it.
It's not good. It's we had we had some great horror movies. We had some really, what were you?
Yeah, we had so much horror. Some of it had to be, unspeakably horrible.
What's your number 3?
I think my number 3 was Despicable Me 4. Yeah, that again, another movie that even though this is just like a flat bad one, it wastes an interesting concept. We talked about how like how can they keep making movies of the same premise, but honestly, they just keep not using the premise. The idea of a supervillain that has to be a family man is a really interesting idea that I think you could do a lot of creative things with. And instead in this one, oh, what happened? Like, I remember the one bit that is actually on point where he has the baby with him and he brings the girl to the villain's lair and they are having to save the baby and steal what they're trying to steal. But
It's a money grab.
it was just nothing. And it is kind of annoying to me when people make kids movies and they go, it's a kids movie and use that as an excuse to make something not good. It's like, no.
It just might be time to retire Gru and the Minions. I think we've seen like 7 feature films now, and
Yeah.
they started out cute and clever, but they've kind of just devolved.
Mm.
My number 3 is Camp Pleasant Lake. You probably never saw this, and that's fine. You should never see it. There are sometimes horror movies that are just, I will try almost anything. And sometimes you find diamonds in the rough, and sometimes all you find is the tall grass of the rough. And this was definitely that tall grass. It was a terrible story. It was terrible execution. It was horrific acting. It was just bad. And that's somewhat similar to my number 2, which was a comedy that I saw from Chelsea Peretti. She stars in it and is the director, and it's called First Time Female Director. It is meant to be, I think it's meant to be some kind of a comedy or a satire. It was like 90 minutes of my life I'll never get back. It was painfully unfunny, despite the fact there are a lot of comedians in it. I mean, and Amy Poehler was a producer. It just did not work for me at all. I don't even know. I'm not even 100% sure what they were going for. And I feel like that's similar to how you're going to feel about your number 2.
Yeah, my number 2 is a movie that just wasted everyone's time for years. It's a COVID movie that came out late. It's Borderlands, and
It was also borderline.
yeah, and I just think every single actor was wasted. I don't know how you do that, but they did that. I'm never gonna get over how Kevin Smith, or Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Hart.
No, Kevin Hart. Goodness gracious.
One of those Kevins.
Yeah, does this big like self-sacrifice moment where he seems like he gave himself up to save everyone, and then he shows up all of a sudden, not a scratch on him in the climax, and literally no character got a scratch on them. Like there was no stakes, there's no threat, there was no anything. It was just like it looked bad, it sounded bad, the performances didn't gel with how heightened reality they were trying to be. I can't think of a redeeming quality in the movie at all.
It was not a good experience, that is for sure, and a lot of wasted talent. We have finally arrived. You and I have different worst movies of the year, but probably both speak to personal disappointment.
Yeah.
I'll let you go first. What is your most disappointing film of the year?
The Crow. I am so mad at this movie's director because of his attitude towards making the movie. I feel like this is a guy. He's the same guy who made
It's Rupert Sanders, right?
Rupert Sanders. He made Ghost in the Shell, and he always just seems to make excuses for doing something that is not like a studio note that's like Hollywood friendly, like, oh, we have to make it an action movie with the bloodbath. So I'm going to make a comment about how, like, I'm actually too good for making a movie that's a masculine revenge fantasy. And then he whitewash cast for Ghost in the Shell, and he's like, well, we're not actually, like, she's not going to be playing like a Japanese character or anything. Oh, blah, blah. It's just a guy who just makes excuses to make movies that are bad, and then try and claim that his hands are tied by circumstance. You could have just made Shelley the Crow. You could have done so many things with this, and instead you just botched up a bunch of different aspects of what made the thing interesting. And worst of all, proved in like a 2-second flashed sequence that you understood the aesthetic and the tone of what made the original source material so interesting, meaning that you could have made something that was more inspired and more investing, and you chose not to. And I cannot get over that. That is the worst type of thing I think that you can do.
Yeah, for my number one, I admire directors that go for big swings. Because big swings, they don't always hit, but sometimes they lead to beautiful things. Sometimes they just go completely off the rail, and that is the case for my
Ooh.
worst film of the year, which is Megalopolis from Francis Ford Coppola. And I have long enjoyed Francis Ford Coppola and his films and his direction. The Godfather and The Godfather Part 2 are probably among my favorite films of all time. I've liked a number of his other films as well. I was curious about Megalopolis, one that he has poured his heart and soul and money into for years, trying to bring to the screen. It is a big and ambitious project that just does not work. The look and the feel are kind of all over the place and strange. You have a fantastic cast, many of whom are in tension with what kind of movie they're in.
Yep.
Adam Driver and Giancarlo Esposito are in a completely different movie than Aubrey Plaza and Shia LaBeouf think they are in. Which leads to there was a lot of unintentional comedy in this, which is where you've kind of gone off the rails, things that are just eliciting outright laughter in the theater that are not meant to be comedy. And I bravo to him for being able to make the movie he says he wanted to make. And I'm sure it was trying to make some kind of statement. It remains hazy to me what that statement is. It was such a high profile train wreck that just ended up being the worst and most disappointing film I saw this year, probably in part because of the potential that was there. The creative potential. But for you, the Crow, a franchise that you dearly love, a story you dearly love, I love Francis Ford Coppola, and I was rooting for him. It just flailed. So that's a little look at 2024. Some of the things that really moved us, and some of the things that really moved us for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Looking forward to diving into 2025 and seeing what it has to offer for us. We will be back next week with our first new film of 2025, which I have mixed feelings about. A sequel to a movie that desperately wanted to be Heat, but just was not that good. We will see you for that next week. And until then, I hope you guys find some fun things either at home or in the theater, and we'll see you at the movies.